Wix. One platform, any website. Unlimited creation.
About how well positioned the U.S. might be to sort of spearhead a transition of government, and what role could we play in this?
Well, the U.S. hasn't done very well in that transition phase in the past couple decades in the other countries where we've done this. So I would imagine the president's going to stay a bit back from that. I think he will probably insist that an election be held, a free and fair election. We know that Maduro basically bigfooted the last election and has maintained power illegally since then. But I would imagine that that this is going to be the end of military action. There's really, now that they have Maduro, there's really nothing that the U.S. needs to do. It's up to the Venezuelan people now, but the U.S. certainly is not going to allow any more oil coming offshore until they're sure that that oil is going back into the coffers, going back in to support the Venezuelan people, and not to protect and prop up the Maduro.
All right, Steve Ganyard, thanks so much. Let's bring in ABC's Matt Rivers, who's joining us now. Matt, I know that you've recently traveled to the region. You were not far from Venezuela, off the coast recently. You've talked to people in that country, have sources there. What are they saying to you about the next steps and how people are reacting in this moment?
Well, I think, going off of what Steve Ganyard just said, talking about fraudulent elections, I think the vast majority of people, by roughly a 3-to-1 margin at this point, voted against the current regime, or the former regime, I guess, with then President Maduro standing for president last year, voting instead for the opposition. So I think it's safe to say that the vast majority of Venezuelans are happy in some respect that Maduro, the longtime strongman leader of this country, is now out of Venezuela. But I think where the trepidation comes in, and this goes to your question, Whit, is what happens next, because Venezuelans as a collective have been through so much, well over a decade of this at this point, with so many struggles economically, politically, militarily now. And so the question there is, what comes next? Who's running the government? What we haven't been hearing is who is the interim president. Delcy Rodriguez, the current vice president, has not claimed that title yet. It does appear that the chief members of Maduro's inner circle remain in power at this point, but their hold on power might be tenuous at this point. We really simply do not know. And we know, given past American incursions in other countries, the transition, quote unquote, to democracy is not always a smooth one. So just because Maduro is out of power, he was not a one-man government. He supported a vast security state apparatus through some of these illicit dealings, according to the United States. And so there is no guarantee that this is just some sort of peaceful transition of power to the opposition. There could be some very complicated times ahead for the people of Venezuela as they figure this out. And even President Trump today said that he doesn't think, on Fox, he was speaking earlier, he doesn't think that this current government should be able to move forward, and that the U.S. is going to keep the pressure on to make sure that doesn't happen. So to sum that all up with, there could be some very complicated days ahead for the country of Venezuela.
Absolutely. Matt Rivers for us. Please stand by. I want to go back to Pierre Thomas, because, Pierre, I understand that President Trump has posted a photo of Maduro in custody. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the photo has Maduro appearing to be in blindfolds. And one of the things you'll notice if you look closely is DEA. And my sources have been telling me all morning that DEA was central to the law enforcement aspect. They helped build the case against Maduro in the past. And you're going to see that and hear that all day from the administration. We expect the president to lay out that, again, this was the military law enforcement action that had been indicted, and there's a superseding indictment that's now unsealed in New York, and that, again, the military was there to conduct this operation on behalf of U.S. law enforcement. But again, in that picture you see, that's the messaging you're going to hear.
And Pierre, while I have you, someone pointed out this contradiction that, we now have this image of Maduro in custody, but then recently President Trump pardoned Juan Orlando Hernandez, former president of Honduras, who was actually convicted on narcotics trafficking charges. How are your sources responding to that, and what's likely to be the reaction going forward?
Well, Whit, that's a very good question. Here's the issue. The administration and President Trump himself has tried to portray the Biden administration prosecution of the former president of Honduras as, quote, illegitimate, and that it was bogus in some regards. Having said that, the man was convicted by a jury in the United States of these crimes. Number two, critics are saying that this is an example of inconsistent, to be kind, in terms of their words, action by the administration. On the one hand, the claim was very similar about the former president of Honduras, that he was engaged and helped participate in facilitating countless amounts of drugs coming into the United States, which is the exact charge that's being brought against Maduro today.
All right, Pierre Thomas Forrest, thank you so much. And it's worth reminding our viewers, too, again, as we're seeing these images coming in from Venezuela, and also that the lower corner there, that is a live picture from Mar-a-Lago, where the president is expected to speak any moment. All of this comes amid these increased tensions with Venezuela and the strikes on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and the Pacific. There have been at least 121 alleged drug smugglers who've been killed in some 30 strikes as all of this has been escalating. And we've been talking about the military buildup in the region. There are now about 15,000 U.S. military personnel in the Caribbean. We've talked about the USS Gerald Ford there and 2,200 Marines aboard a number of ships in the Caribbean. No doubt all of them there to support this operation. So let's go back to our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz, to talk more about the operation itself. And Martha, you mentioned that we were getting reports of some injuries as part of this strike.
Apparently, several Americans were injured. There were no deaths. The president announced this on Fox News earlier today. And a helicopter was damaged, but did manage to make it out of Venezuela. But this was a remarkable operation. Truly, as far as we know so far, flawlessly performed by U.S. forces and law enforcement. We did, as you say, have all those U.S. military forces, 15,000 in the area, and they have been overseeing the strike on these suspected drug boats, 30 suspected drug boats since September. This was the massive show of force. This was Maduro, get out of there, stop this drug trade, resign, get out of the country. We also know that President Trump had spoken to Maduro very recently. That may have been to make him feel comfortable and not afraid. We think it was probably in the presidential palace where this capture happened, where President Trump described the forces going in, the military forces, and we presume the law enforcement forces as well, going after Maduro in the dead of night, capturing him and his wife. U.S. forces had been practicing this, President Trump said. They built a building. This sounds so much like the death of bin Laden, building a compound, knowing exactly where you go. This would be standard for something like the Delta Force or Navy SEALs to go into an area that they knew that they had been surveilling, likely from drones. And as we said earlier, a source telling us that there was also a CIA clandestine team on the ground watching Maduro for several weeks, getting his pattern of life, that so-called pattern of life, where he goes, what are the movements, who are with him, what kind of security does he have around him, and building, I would imagine, likely from some sort of asset on the ground, some sort of person who knows Maduro, knows his pattern of life, what exactly that palace looks like, where he sleeps, where they could enter that building, where that safe room was that they say he never made it into, even though they said those forces were prepared to breach those doors. But I guess we have the president coming out here soon with.
All right, Martha. Yes, as you noted right there, President Trump is entering the room here, heading to the podium to speak from Mar-a-Lago about this really extraordinary strike on Venezuela, taking President Nicolas Maduro and his wife into custody. Once again, we also learned today about that superseding indictment, new charges facing Maduro. And here is President Trump from Mar-a-Lago.
Okay, thank you very much. This is big stuff. And we appreciate you being here. Late last night and early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital, of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault. And it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolas Maduro to justice. This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history. And if you think about it, we've done some other good ones, like the attack on Soleimani, the attack on al-Baghdadi, and the obliteration and decimation of the Iran nuclear sites just recently in an operation known as Midnight Hammer. All perfectly executed and done. No nation in the world could achieve what America achieved yesterday, or frankly, in just a short period of time. All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military, working with U.S. law enforcement, successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. It was dark. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we have. It was dark and it was deadly. But captured along with his wife, Celia Flores, both of whom now face American justice. Maduro and Flores have been indicted in the Southern District of New York, it's Jay Clayton, for their campaign of deadly narco-terrorism against the United States and its citizens. I want to thank the men and women of our military who achieved such an extraordinary success overnight with breathtaking speed, power, precision, and competence. You rarely see anything like it. You've seen some raids in this country that didn't go so well. They were an embarrassment. If you look back to Afghanistan, or if you look back to the Jimmy Carter days, they were different days. We're a respected country again, like never before. These highly trained warriors, operating in collaboration with U.S. law enforcement, caught them in a very ready position. They were waiting for us. They knew we had many ships out in the sea, we're just sort of waiting. They knew we were coming. So they were in what's called a ready position, but they were completely overwhelmed and very quickly incapacitated. If you would have seen what I saw last night, you would have been very impressed. I'm not sure that you'll ever get to see it, but it was an incredible thing to see. Not a single American service member was killed, and not a single piece of American equipment was lost. We had many helicopters, many planes, many people involved in that fight. But think of that, not one piece of military equipment was lost, not one service member was, more importantly, killed. The United States military is the strongest and most fearsome military on the planet by far, with capabilities and skills our enemies can scarcely begin to imagine. We have the best equipment anywhere in the world. There's no equipment like what we have. And you see that even if you just look at the boats. You know, we've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by sea. 90%. Each boat kills on average, 25,000 people. We knocked out 97%. And those drugs mostly come from a place called Venezuela. We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition, and it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about. We want peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela, and that includes many from Venezuela that are now living in the United States and want to go back to their country. It's their homeland. We can't take a chance that somebody else takes over Venezuela that doesn't have the good of the Venezuelan people in mind. We've had decades of that. We're not going to let that happen. We're there now, and what people don't understand, but they understand as I say this, we're there now, but we're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place. So we're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it, essentially, until such time as a proper transition can take place. As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust, for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave if we needed to do so. We actually assumed that a second wave would be necessary, but now it's probably not. The first wave, if you'd like to call it that, the first attack was so successful, we probably don't have to do a second, but we're prepared to do a second wave, a much bigger wave, actually. This was pinpoint, but we have a much bigger wave that probably won't have to do. This partnership of Venezuela with the United States of America, a country that everybody wants to be involved with because of what we were able to do and accomplish, will make the people of Venezuela rich, independent, and safe. And it will also make the many, many people from Venezuela that are living in the United States extremely happy. They suffered. They suffered. So much was taken from them. They're not going to suffer anymore. The illegitimate dictator Maduro was the kingpin of a vast criminal network responsible for trafficking colossal amounts of deadly and illicit drugs into the United States. As alleged in the indictment, he personally oversaw the vicious cartel known as Cartel de las Solas, which flooded our nation with lethal poison, responsible for the deaths of countless Americans, the many, many Americans, hundreds of thousands over the years of Americans died because of him. Maduro and his wife will soon face the full might of American justice and stand trial on American soil. Right now, they're on a ship they'll be heading to, ultimately, New York. And then a decision will be made, I assume, between New York and Miami or Florida. But we have people where the overwhelming evidence of their crimes will be presented in a court of law. And I've seen it. I've seen what we have. It's both horrible and breathtaking that something like this could have been allowed to take place. For many years after his term as president of Venezuela expired, Maduro remained in power and waged a ceaseless campaign of violence, terror, and subversion against the United States of America, threatening not only our people, but the stability of the entire region. And you all saw it. In addition to trafficking gigantic amounts of illegal drugs that inflicted untold suffering and human destruction all over the country, all over, in particular, the United States. Maduro sent savage and murderous gangs, including the bloodthirsty prison gang, Tren de Aragua, to terrorize American communities nationwide. And he did indeed. They were in Colorado. They took over apartment complexes. They cut the fingers off people if they called police. They were brutal, but they're not so brutal now. And I just have to congratulate our military, Pete, and everybody, and our National Guard, because the job that they've done, whether it's in Washington, D.C., where we have a totally safe city, where it was one of the most unsafe cities anywhere in the world, frankly, and now we have no crime in Washington, D.C. We haven't had a killing. We had the terrorist attack a few weeks ago. A little bit of a different kind of a threat, but we haven't had a killing in a long period of time, 6, 7 months. We used to have two, on average, 2 a week in Washington, our capital. We don't have that anymore. The restaurants are opening. Everyone's happy. They're walking their daughters. They're walking their children, their wives. They walk to restaurants. Restaurants are opening all over Washington, D.C. So I want to thank the National Guard. I want to thank our military. And I want to thank law enforcement. Been amazing. And they should do it with more cities. We're doing it, as you know, and we're doing it in Memphis, Tennessee right now, and crime is down. We've just sort of started a few weeks ago, but crime is down now 77%. Louisiana called, great person, and he wanted us to help him, as you know, in a certain very nice part of that's when they had the riots in Los Angeles. We did a great job. Got no credit for it. To terrorize our people, and now Maduro will never again be able to threaten an American citizen or anybody from Venezuela. There will no longer be threats. For years, I've highlighted the stories of those innocent Americans whose lives were so heartlessly robbed by this Venezuelan terrorist organization. Really one of the worst. One of the worst. They say the worst. Americans like 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungari from Houston. Beautiful Jocelyn Nungari. What happened to her? They, as you know, they kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered by Tren de Aragua animals. They murdered Jocelyn and left her dead under the bridge. There was a bridge that will never be the same to so many people after seeing what happened. As I've said many times, the Maduro regime emptied out their prisons, sent their worst and most violent monsters into the United States to steal American lives. And they came from mental institutions and insane asylums. They came from prisons and jails. The reason I say both, they sound similar. Actually, prisons a little bit more hostile, a little bit tougher. A mental institution isn't as tough as an insane asylum, but we got them both. They sent from their mental institutions. They sent from their jails, prisons. They were drug dealers. They were drug kingpins. They sent everybody bad into the United States, but no longer. And we have now a border where nobody gets through. In addition, Venezuela
That's good, isn't it?
unilaterally seized and sold American oil, American assets, and American platforms, costing us
Really good.
billions and billions of dollars. They did this a while ago, but we never had a president that did anything about it. They took all of our property. It was our property. We built it. And we never had a president that decided to do anything about it. Instead, they fought wars that were 10,000 miles away. We built Venezuela oil industry with American talent, drive, and skill. And the socialist regime stole it from us during those previous administrations, and they stole it through force. This constituted one of the largest thefts of American property in the history of our country. Considered the largest theft of property in the history of our country. Massive oil infrastructure was taken like we were babies, and we didn't do anything about it. I would have done something about it. America will never allow foreign powers to rob our people or drive us back into and out of our own hemisphere. That's what they did. Furthermore, under the now deposed dictator Maduro, Venezuela was increasingly hosting foreign adversaries in our region and acquiring menacing offensive weapons that could threaten U.S. interests and lives. And they used those weapons last night. Potentially in league with the cartels operating along our border. All of these actions were in gross violation of the core principles of American foreign policy, dating back more than 2 centuries. And not anymore. All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines.
Told you.
And the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal. But we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Monroe Document. I don't know. It's Monroe Doctrine. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Won't happen. So just in concluding, for decades, other administrations have neglected or even contributed to these growing security threats in the Western Hemisphere. Under the Trump administration, we are reasserting American power in a very powerful way in our home region. And our home region is very different than it was just a short while ago. The future will be, and we did this in my first term. We had great dominance in my first term, and we have far greater dominance right now. Everyone's coming back to us. The future will be determined by the ability to protect commerce and territory and resources that are core to national security. These are core to our national security. Just like tariffs are, they've made our country rich, and they've made our national security stronger than ever before. But these are the iron laws that have always determined global power. And we're going to keep it that way. We will secure our borders. We will stop the terrorists. We will crash the cartels, and we will defend our citizens against all threats, foreign and domestic. Other presidents may have lacked the courage or whatever to defend America, but I will never allow terrorists and criminals to operate with impunity against the United States. This extremely successful operation should serve as warning to anyone who would threaten American sovereignty or endanger
enforcement raid flawlessly executed by the greatest Americans
or 2:01
falling
a.m.
asleep?
Caracas local time.